بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت عليم حكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Thank you for joining us again for another reflection upon the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala during this blessed month of Ramadan, which is the Shahr Quran, which is the month of the Quran. And so, inshallah, we are going to continue in our series as we've been doing, where we just reflect upon a portion of the Quran based upon the juice that's associated with the day of Ramadan. So, this being the fifth day of the fast of Ramadan, that inshallah we're going to be looking at the fifth juice of the Quran. And so, in particular, inshallah, we're going to look at a verse in Surah Al-Nisa, in the 82nd verse specifically, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says,
أفلا يتدبرون القرآن ولو كان من عند غير الله لوجدوا فيه اختلافا كثيرا.
which in the translation of the meaning of the verse, it states, do they not then reflect on the Quran? Had it been from any other than Allah, they would have certainly found in it many inconsistencies. And so this is a situation where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's asking us a rhetorical question, that do they not reflect upon the Quran? And the thing that we can see from here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He, as it's been mentioned by some of the Mufassirin, is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He doesn't just say, do they not recite the Quran? Because recitation of the Quran is one aspect of engagement with the Quran. But here, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses the word tadabbur. That's, do they not ponder upon, do they not reflect upon, do they not think deeply about the Quran? And this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, is that this is the way that we should approach the Quran. That whatever level that we may be at in terms of our relationship with the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, meaning that if we are a common Muslim who is not necessarily a person of scholarship in terms of Islamic scholarship, or if we are a student of knowledge, or if we are a scholar, or if we are of those who are the mufassirin who have even a greater understanding of the Quran, whatever our level is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that we should do tadabbur, that we should deeply reflect upon the Quran. That this is something that we are called to, is that it's not just an aspect of recitation of the Quran, but we should really try to think deeply in regards to the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That for the believer in particular, this is where we're going to find the shifa from the Quran, the healing from the Quran. Is that one of the names of the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a shifa, is a healing. And this is why if a person were to truly deeply dive into the Quran, they will find the things that they are looking for, and even those things that they didn't know that they were looking for. This is the one of the miraculous aspects of the Quran, is that it is a book that it can never be exhausted. Some, they like to describe it as the sea without shore. And this is why to this day we still have ulama, we still have scholars who are continuously writing commentaries on the Quran. That no matter how many commentaries that we have on the Quran, there's just more and more and more. And so what we should be striving to do in this month of Ramadan is that as we are reciting the Quran, that inshallah we can have our own portion of tadabbur. And this is why the ulama, they mention, is that for many of the righteous, they would actually have multiple khatams of the Quran, meaning that they would have multiple readings of the Quran in its completion. So, for example, they would have one reading of the Quran so that they can fulfill the prophetic injunction on making sure to read the entirety of the Quran within at least 30 days. And then they would have another recitation of the Quran that they would be doing, which is from the aspect of tadabbur, which is from the aspect of this deep contemplation that we've been referring to. And then they would have another recitation of the Quran where they would be looking at other aspects of the sciences of the Quran. And so this is something that we can all engage in as well, in the sense that we can engage with the Quran on these different levels. That we can engage in the Quran from the standpoint of recitation, so that we fulfill the prophetic injunction of completing it within 30 days, but then also from the standpoint of this aspect of tadabbur, of really trying to contemplate the deeper meanings of the Quran. And so this is something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's encouraging us to do. However, at the same time, we want to be cognizant of the level that we're at. So just as it wouldn't be befitting for someone who is a non-medical specialist to start trying to give medical advice based upon some medical books that he may have read. Similarly, in this particular case, when we do tadabbur of the Quran, if we are not qualified as scholars to give legal rulings or make certain legal judgments or other type of judgments within the realms of the Islamic sciences, then that is not our level of tadabbur. That we should leave those things to the specialists and take the beneficial things that we can learn from in terms of the general lessons that the Quran has for us. So that is something that we just want to make sure that we don't, for example, or say, should I say, that we don't go outside of our boundaries. And so we want to make sure that we're having a proper tadabbur when we do reflect upon the Quran. And then also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He mentions that if we were to truly ponder on the Quran, that we will come to understand, we will come to know that this has to be from God, that this cannot be from anyone else. And he just gives a simple example that if it was from anyone else, that we would have found much in terms of differences within the Quran, meaning that we would have found many contradictions, we would have found many inconsistencies in the Quran. Whereas if a person is truly being honest in their reflection upon the Quran, and if they were to truly go deep into the understandings and the tafsir and the explanation of the Quran, you'll find that this is a book that has no inconsistencies. And this is only something that can come from God. And this is why the Arabs of the time of the Prophet Muhammad, they were dumbfounded by the Quran, because they were people who were very well versed within the Arabic language. And when the Quran came, they knew that this is not the type of language that can come from a person. And so this is one of the other aspects of the Quran that we take as being a sign of its miraculous nature, is that this is one of the proofs that we have of this being a book coming from God Himself. And so this is part of what we will see if we do this aspect of tadabbur, of this aspect of continuous engagement with the Quran in terms of our reflection upon what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying to us and what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said and told us about previous nations, and also the things Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that is going to come, and also the things that we are only finding out in our own times today. Is that the Quran is something that is limitless. Again, this is why the ulama, they call it a sea without shore. Is that you can never exhaust the Quran. And so during this blessed month of Ramadan, again, which is the Shahr Ramadan, the Shahr of Quran, that is the month of the Quran, let us do our part in terms of this tadabbur. That yes, we should still continue our recitation, trying to see if we are able to recite the entirety, or at least listen to the entirety of the Quran being recited during the month of Ramadan, but also having our portion of this tadabbur. Even if it's just one ayat or one surah, that we try to engage in the Quran in this fashion of really contemplating on the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so that inshallah we can benefit from the kalam Allah, from the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because ultimately there's no greater speech. And so may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us a close connection with the Quran. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us to be of the Ahlul Quran, the people of the Quran. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow for the Quran to be the most beloved to us, and that there's nothing more beloved to us than the book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the speech of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala continue to bless you all during this blessed month of Ramadan. And may He continue to accept from you all of your good works and all of your ibadah, all of your acts of worship. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala anam wa asmanana wa ni'ma wakil. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.